Path to Purpose Project. I'm Devorah Spillman, and today I am delighted to welcome Norma T. Hollis. Hi, Norma.
Hi, Devorah. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So I'm thrilled that you're here. Let me read a little bit about you so everybody can get at least a little formal introduction before we dive in. So Norma T. Hollis is an authenticity consultant who teaches individuals and organizations how to live with no regrets. She studied human nature for over 30 years and created the Authentic Voice System to help people find, live, and share their authentic voice. Her work raises self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-management, foundations for a no-regrets life. She also helps organizations build dynamic teams and create engaging corporate cultures. Norma is the author of 10 Steps to Authenticity, and her upcoming book, Blueprint for Authentic Leaders, will be released in 2018. Norma has been selected as one of 16 women to represent the United States on a 5-week visit to China, ooh, that's super cool, to teach her Authentic Voice System to university students through the World Academy for the Future of Women. Norma is committed to helping leaders make an authentic difference in the world. Woohoo, Norma, I'm so thrilled you're here.
Thank you. It feels great to be here with you, Devorah. Thank you.
So, all right. So Norma and I, we always have these great conversations before we have a recorded conversation, and just to give us a little direction. So, Norma, tell us just maybe just a little bit basically what you do, and then I want you to tell your story. I just want to tell everybody, I really want Norma here because the work she does with authenticity, I think, is very powerful as part of telling your story and finding your voice, which is so much of her work. And kind of in my vision for this summit, we're going to go from finding your purpose, which is connected to so much of what you do, to then finding your voice, telling your story, and eventually launching. And so I think we're gonna focus a little bit on the tell your story, but I think we're gonna touch on everything a little bit. So start with just a little bit of who you are, what you do in the world, and then we'll kind of go deeper.
Right. Well, I refer to myself as an authenticity consultant because I have been researching human nature for actually all my life. Officially, I guess you'd say about 30 years. And when I say researching human nature, I really was trying to understand myself. And so understanding myself, I understood kind of a blueprint for everybody. And I've had the opportunity to develop it, to create programs around it, to certify people to deliver it, speakers and coaches. And I've just been delighted to see how it's impacted people's lives. And I'm delighted also, Devorah, to have told you the story, the whole story, because what I'm doing now is kind of the new phase of the story, if you will, and the culmination of a very long journey, a journey of faith to get to this point. So I'm at a point that I'm just super excited about putting out in the world what has taken me a number of years and experiences to create.
So Norma, let's tell your childhood story, all right? Because you have a very powerful childhood story, and it will be lovely for people to see that you can actually include your childhood stories as part of your story of who you are and why you do what you do in the world. And often our brilliance is sort of hidden there, or our essence in some way. Right. So tell us a little bit about what happened to you when you were a child.
Well, let me just preface that by saying for everyone, as you're looking for your own message, when I work with clients, I look at the threads in their life. Because as you're going through life, certain things occur, some that you generate yourself, some that just happen spontaneously, by happenstance or through relationships, that continues to show up in different ways. Sometimes you don't recognize it because you're in the frame. But when you are able to see that through your own work or through working with a coach, it really helps you to solidify what your message is. So, yeah. So I wanted to preface it with that because my whole story is how my message has developed from the time I was 8 or 9 years old to where I am right now. Because what I just told you earlier didn't just start. It's a culmination or the evolution, if you will, of my purpose, of why I'm here, of how I'm actualizing my purpose. So
as you tell your story, you can kind of begin to show us how you've pulled those threads together and where they've led you.
Yes, thank you. I will do that. So at 8 years old, July 5th, day after 4th of July, and I woke up that morning with brown spots all over my pillow. And I didn't know what it was. I ran to my father with my pillow, and he determined that something was wrong with my ear. I had an infection. I had what they call a perforated eardrum that my father always called a hole in my head. So the eardrum, they gave me the medication, the penicillin and other antibiotics, and between hives and it not really working, I ended up in the hospital for a day for a culture to be taken to see what would stop the infection. And they only found one thing that would stop the infection, and it had to be administered in the doctor's office the next day. So when I got there, it was an ear, nose, throat doctor, and the chair was like a dentist chair, so you kind of sit up. And when I sat down, my mother went to my left side, and the nurse went to my feet, which should have been a clue. And then the doctor pulled out this metal cone, and he put it in my ear, and then got this long instrument like a needle, dipped it into a clear solution, and then slowly began to insert it in my ear as the nurse and my mother were holding on to me, because I hollered and hollered because it hurt. I mean, I can't even tell you how much it hurt. All the way home, I kept telling my mother to slow down, because every time she went over a bump, the liquid in my ear would find a new place to hurt. Oh. Yeah, it was pretty painful. And that was a part of my journey of authenticity, because the adults in my life didn't understand my needs. They didn't really give me any therapy for dealing with that. They just, I don't know, I was pretty resilient, but that was my first awareness of something's not right here, or something's not something. And then I had to go back to the doctor's office and have that done again. I don't remember how many times, but that, whatever. And then that was followed by some really serious earaches. And it was like God took his fingernail and put it inside of my eardrum and just kept it there and wouldn't move it. So I tell this story a lot. Pills and shots and drops wouldn't do. And then I'm in Buffalo, New York one summer. I'm 9, and the earaches come, and my mother says, call Papa. And that's when I say in my ever poem about it, if pills and shots and drops won't do, what methods would Grandpa, a preacher, pursue? Well, what Grandpa did was take me in the bedroom and talk to me and tell me that he could stop my ear from hurting if I would give my life to God. And I said, Grandpa, what does that mean? He says, God must have something important for you to do to give you so much pain at a young age. Mm-hmm. So I thought about that for a minute, because I kind of was born with the sense that I had something to do. And none of the adults around me seemed to have that perspective. And Grandpa's the first one that kind of had that. So it picked my interest for a minute. And then I said to Grandpa, I said, well, I'm happy to give my life to God, but can I ask one thing of God? He said, what's that? I said, can I ask God, can I have the training for what I'm supposed to do by the time I'm 30 so I could have a life of my own? Grandpa kind of chuckled. I mean, I'm only 9, so I didn't quite get it, but it looked, it was kind of a funny thing. But he said he was sure God would grant that. He prayed over my ear, and I never had that level of pain again.
Wow. That's amazing. Wow. And yeah. So what happened after that?
Well, for a long time, I kind of looked for that thing. I was always curious about it. And eventually I forgot all about it. Not only that, I eventually forgot all about the ear pain. I just, lived my life. But, you forget about things, but it doesn't mean that your subconscious hasn't forgotten about it, So later, I was always a very independent child. I was a very creative child born into a very traditional family. And they never understood me, and I never understood them. So, but what I did come to the world believing is that you do what your parents say, that your parents are your guideposts, and I think it was one of my frustrations because they didn't get me. And so by the time I'm 28, I realized how bad it was, because that's when I realized I had done everything that they had said do. I had the degree in education, because if my husband leaves me, I have a job. I had a husband who had a good job. We had cars, we had a house. I had a good job, and I was miserable. And I had no clue what to do with myself, because I didn't know who I was. And that's when I embarked on this journey to get to know who I was. And I thought that since I was 28, that I was just about doing what God wanted me to do, which I thought was working with preschool children. I had doing some work with that. And I didn't know that at 28 is when the 30 years started. Yeah. So that whole journey of getting to know myself was a 30-year journey. It took me first into directing preschool programs. I directed Head Start programs. My last program was 250 employees in 1,500 children in 31 facilities in Southern California. So it was a large program, challenging in its way, but it gave me a lot of human development understanding. When I left that program, after about 20 years there, I started to speak, and I was speaking for free, and I loved it. And I thought about becoming a professional speaker, but I did not have the energy that speakers have because of my ear infections. And I took antibiotics for 40 straight years.
Wow.
And I oftentimes had more than one infection a year. I actually had ear infections, and I haven't told you this, Devorah. I had ear infections for 55 straight years.
Wow.
Every single year for 55 years.
Wow.
So I didn't have the energy because all the antibiotics gave me Candida albicans, had a really bad case of that. And Candida is what we get as yeast infection as women, and I had it throughout my entire system. It had created a root system that, and I've had 11 surgeries in my, so far. Well, period. I'm done. 11 surgeries. And watch my language, you know. So
Wow.
that was, the next round after that is in directing preschool programs. When authenticity came in, was because what I found out is that of the 250, 150 employees I had, however many it was, only about 20% of them really liked children. The rest of it was just a job, okay? So how authentic is that? It was just a political piece because it was low income Head Start, and it was jockeying for the best place, best part, and how can I overrule this person? And it wasn't really geared towards what's best for the children. And I mean, I was very naive. I didn't know that. I thought everybody, I mean, we're here working with kids. You know, I thought everybody in life did things because they had a purpose, because there's a reason to come here on the planet and do some things. And little did I know that that's just not the planet I'm on. So at least when I was young in my traditional family, I thought I was the only one. I mean, now I know there's thousands, millions of us. And I'm so glad to be connected with them because it takes all of us to get this work done.
Wow. So I want you to jump forward to kind of what you're doing, how you talk a little bit about how you kind of went from authenticity and how that led you into the whole concept of no regrets, and then kind of the more current story. And, you know, so because I think it's going to help people to begin to see how do you choose what story to tell? How do you get back up? How do you continue to have that courage and resilience as you're going forward? So I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of where you are now and what you're excited about, but also about what that whole 10 years, a little bit about that.
Right. Well, let me just preface that by saying the whole journey has been identifying what's the reason, what am I doing, what's the purpose, what's it for? And as I went through this 30 years of understanding myself, I was also writing continuously. I ended up with this grid and this whole system and program. And I even had all these 9 books written about it, but I didn't know what it was. And it took a coach to tell me, you've written about authenticity. And that's I was too close to it. I was in the frame. I was writing and channeling and experiencing and going through stuff. And I couldn't stand over it enough to really see what it was. It's still it's a lot better now. But as creative people, when we're creating, our creation is a part of us. And for a long time, for many decades, I could not separate authenticity from Norma. I mean, I'll be honest, I really couldn't. And so that had other challenges, you know, along the way that I had to make a conscious effort along the way to say, I have to separate authenticity from me and the needs of the company and my purpose from my needs.
And what also is interesting to me about that is, you know, have this whole project separated into find your purpose, tell your story, launch your project. And there's something interesting you said, because often when you're in that experiencing your purpose, you don't have the name of it yet. You don't have the words of it. And so I think that's very insightful that in all different ways, there are times when that's the process that I see. It's like, you've got to get in that no holds barred experience. And then once that happens, often we have to say things back to each other. We often say the line, we're all a little invisible to ourselves.
Yes, we have. I like that. That's so true. Yes, that's very true. That's very true. So that's actually when my, what I call my 10 years of tragedy came about.
Nice.
I had gotten my brand. I had taken my materials and written them up. At that point, I was the first African-American woman to have owned a speakers bureau for African-American speakers. Wow. So I was and this was when the internet was just getting started. So I was pretty fortunate to become very well known pretty quickly in the Black community. And so therefore, when I decided, when a coach told me, well, take your program and go try it out, go get proteges. Okay, I'll do that. So I used a lot of my miles on a lot of my American Express and other credit cards I had, and traveled and went to my list and asked people to sponsor me and support me. And if they would host an event in their city, I would give them a free membership in my protege program. And I had lots of people that were just very willing. I went to a number of cities, 20 cities altogether in 18 months, and it was just great. Wow. And I did that under the banner of cash in on your authentic voice, because my market then was speakers, and authenticity was what I found when I worked with speakers, that so many of them want to be somebody else and try to speak like someone else. So the whole authenticity piece was important there. And so, they say in marketing, sell them what they think they want and give them what they need. So I marketed it about cash in on your voice, and I taught them how to be authentic as a speaker. And on my 20th event, I had it in LA. I had my biggest crowd, 115 people, my biggest sales, and that was the start of my 10 years of tragedy. Because the day before then, I was notified that my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Oh.
Yeah, I was in LA, she was in Detroit.
Oh.
So that's 5 days later, and she was dead in 2 weeks.
Oh.
And that was just the beginning. So I had 3 employees at the time, and 2 months later, my number 1 employee, Linda, her mother died.
Wow.
And then 3 months later, the woman who was running my speakers bureau, her mother died. So all 3 of us lost our mother. 3 out of 4, we all lost our mothers in a 6-month period.
Wow.
And then a few months later, my brother died. Mm-hmm. And then a few months later, I had kidney stone surgery. And then a few months later, my person that ran my speakers bureau, whose mother died, got a sugar count of 500 and had to quit. And then the girl who assisted her, the 4th person, her father got sick and she had to move back to Detroit. So all of a sudden I have no employees, so therefore no business, because I wasn't running the business. I owned it, but I didn't run it. So the mothers have died, I've had the kidney surgery, I've lost my employees, I've lost my business. I got a little depressed for a while. And fast forward to 2014, I broke my foot. Thought I was rolling around fine and moving in the speaking industry, and broke my foot. And then the next year was the end of the 10 years. It started out in January with a fire in my complex. As I'm looking out my window, my blinds are melting in front of me. And so I had to run out there, and that took a year for them to repair and replace all that stuff. The end of the year, I had 2 more kidney stone surgeries. But the worst thing was in June of that year, my husband was murdered.
Oh,
and he wasn't just murdered, Devorah, he was decapitated.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh.
And his head has never been recovered, nor have they arrested anyone for.
Oh, unbelievable. Oh, my gosh.
So that was my 10 years of tragedy. During that 10 years, I did some coaching, and I did a lot of writing and created a lot of content and tried a few events, but I just couldn't really pull them off because I just wasn't ready. And I also realized that for my program, I needed to reposition authenticity, because authenticity by itself is difficult to sell because we all think we're authentic. And I take authenticity in such a deep level. I go into a deep level of self-awareness. I go into how self-awareness leads you to accept yourself as you are, strengths and vulnerabilities. And with that, you get to be able to manage yourself, because I think that's what we all want to do. We all have this spirit in us that wants one thing, and we don't have to control that spirit or whatever it is that we have to control within us. And that's self-management. So I have a phenomenal program, and I think that's why I've been able to be resilient and get past all these things. This was 2.5 years ago that Robert was murdered. And it was a long depression, about a year of depression. And then a year of just, trying to figure out what am I going to do now? Because Robert, as I mentioned before, he was with, we were connected. When we first met, we just first as soon as we met, I didn't mention it before, but we were just connected immediately. And I always knew, I told my mother when I was a kid that I would meet my husband after 30 in California. So I got to learn Spanish, and she didn't get it. But I did meet him after 30 in California. We met in church. And from the day we met, we've been together ever since. So we were just that connected. Yeah.
You know, Norma, I don't know if you can even answer this, but your being feels to me like it's filled with light and filled with joy and filled with love. And I want you to say something about how you got back up. How and what you've learned and like why you've gone into no regrets. Say something to us about this, because I think it's so, I want you to share like something to help somebody else who's maybe in their 10 years of tragedy or whatever their version of that is. Like, we have hard things, and God willing, most of us don't have something that hard. But talk a little bit. This is a deep crowd. I tell everybody I'm deep and a little wacky. People know I'm a person of deep faith. You know, my Jewish faith is, I talk about it all the time. It's part of who I am. So just share, if you're willing, a little bit how you have light in your being now. How did you get back up?
I think I've always had the light, you know, it just gets turned on more and more. You know, I really did get I didn't realize as depressed as I was. And I think my depression probably has been long-term since my ear, and I never had really help, you know, about it in different ways. At a certain point, a couple of things converged at the same time. I ran out of money, for one. And so it's like, you know, you can't just keep living and just counting on faith to make sure things go right, because faith without action doesn't mean anything. I put feet to it. And the other thing is just being faithful. I know I had times, I remember being outside in my front yard talking to one of my girlfriends who was by, and I said, I'm on strike. She said, what do you mean you're on strike? I said, why would God give me all this and not give me some way to use it? I'm going on strike. So she said, so what are you going to do? So I don't know. I'm just letting it be known that I'm on strike. So I got to a certain point when, I don't know, I guess, number one, I realized I had to reposition authenticity, and I had just been going to every corner and crevice I could think of to talk to people and get some ideas. How do I call this? What do I do with it? And then in the last year, spent much more money than I should have with people that I thought could help me, but really could not, and didn't get out of it early enough. So, you know, found myself in a different position. And then I kept saying to myself, well, Norma, if you made this commitment when you were 8 years old or 9 years old, and you have spent your whole life being the T in Norma T. Hollis, my friends say, is for tenacious, because I have done nothing but this. I could not do much more at one point in my life because the Candida albicans was so bad. And then I got kind of unemployable because I'm kind of a maverick, and companies don't want mavericks. And then every time I would look for something, and first of all, I wouldn't get an interview, or something I could feel the energy of spirits interceding, say, no, you're not going to do that. And I finally got one silly little interview to help me with a little bit of cash flow. And I actually got to the placement interview, and I'm like, whoa, there were no interruptions. I made it to the interview. And I got there, and I went to check in, and they said, oh, Miss Hollis, you're here at noon. Your interview was at 9 o'clock this morning. I just say, okay. So I'm really supposed to do nothing but this. I'm really supposed to focus on this. Is what my assignment was. I've known that all my life. I've spent my life doing it. So how could a God that I'm so faithful in not provide for me for what I need to do? And so sure enough, through a LinkedIn contact that I had not met, he had reached out in April. I didn't even get back to July. But when I got back to him, he was just what I was looking for at the time. He invited me to come to his event as his guest. And I met several people, and I got inspired. And one of the people that I met, I had a conversation, and he said that, I don't know where it came from, but he said that the number one regret of people in hospices is that they did not live life to their true self. but instead of the expectations of others. Or he said, he paraphrased, and I went and looked it up. And when I read it, it was like, bingo, lights just went on and on and on and on, because I said, that's what I have a solution for. Because everything you do, particularly as a coach, a speaker, has to be a solution to a problem. And you have to know what the problem is. So I had this great solution that God gave me over a 40-year period to put out in the world, but I didn't know what problem it was solving. So as soon as I heard that, I got back home on September 1st. By October 1st, I had a logo. I had my whole program, because I already had a program. I had to repurpose it. I had my whole cover. I had my whole package. I've done 8 videos that are already out. I had my first video went out, and it has over 800 views so far. So for me, that's kind of viral. So I'm thrilled. And I have an event coming up. People are already registered for it. And I also have, I just have talked to my first potential client today from the UK who wants to sign up to be one of my coaches. So I'm just like, I'm picking up where I left off on November 1st, 2008. And I have a new brand. And I even now can train people to deliver 4 different one-day programs as speakers, because I did the Cash It on Your Voice before. I have the No Regrets now. I have a spiritual one that includes a labyrinth walk, and I have one for raising authentic children. So all that time I had my 10-year tragedy, I was writing. So I have all these programs and all these videos and all of these audios and all these workbooks and all these inventories and all this stuff that I now can put out to make a difference within the world and help people to really live with no regrets.
Wow. I just makes me so happy to hear you say this and to see that light in your face, and to have you hold this space for people, that anybody who's listening who has gone through hard things, that you can get back up. Because, you know, and that faithfulness, that trust is so crucial, because it allowed you to pay attention and to not get stuck. You've done this deep work all your life. You've been guided all your life, and you weren't going to be let off the hook.
Say what?
You weren't going to be let off the hook.
No, I was not.
And I find that with a lot of people, it's like they are not going to, you're not going to be let off the hook. If you have something you are supposed to be saying in this world, we in this summit, we are here to help you do that. Because and I'm going to have Norma talk a little bit about your free gift, because I mean it. If you have something that you want to say, I want you to be one of those no regrets people. I want you to be a person who says what you came here to say. So Norma, talk a little bit about what your free gift is and how it will help people.
Let me just do one thing before I do that, Devorah, because I want to speak to the financial side.
Oh, yeah. Good idea.
We all, as creative people, have problems because we don't quite get it. How people can be so driven towards money and you're not just helping. And if we're doing God's work or doing what we're sent to do, it should be easy and it should come right. So the reality is it doesn't flow, but it does, because if you're truly on your authentic path, doing your best to be on you may not be fully on it, but you're really doing your best, your gosh darndest to be on it, then, and you trust, and you have the faith and the commitment, the T and whatever it stands for in your name or whatever your word is, that you're really doing that, funds will come. They may not come in the manner that you are expecting, but resources will come. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing that's important on your side is that you have to cut down your expenses to as reasonable as possible. And it may take years to learn to enjoy a more austere life, but it's worth it, because the benefits are, not just the finances that will come for you later, but I know one of my overriding goals is wherever I came from, I want to go back and them say you did a good job, I don't have to go back again. So, or if you go back again.
You don't mean what town you came from. Either.
Right, exactly. And you don't get that. You earn that. You earn that by going through with the faith that deep in your gut, you were sent to do. And no matter what anybody else says, and that regrets piece that I believe people have of living to others' expectations is ignoring that gut. So when you ignore your gut, that also, we know, creates the cancers and all the other things that go on in life that take you out before you're ready, and I guess take you ready to come back again and do it again. But so when the money gets tight, I just had a tight situation lately because I'm in the process of this transition, and what money I had, because I made some bad decisions, as I mentioned, and some of the money I had to use wisely to get this new launch out. And I'm looking at my next step, and I know I need some cash flow to get there. And rather than doing some of the things I've done in the past, I just said, I'm just going to wait, because I know something's going to happen. And I've never been so cash flow poor as I am at this moment. But I've also never been in such joy that I am at this moment, because I know that I have finally arrived to where I've wanted to be for a long time, having clarity of what to do, having been obedient enough to use even the downtimes to allow whatever it is to come through me and to create it and to create something. And that just gives me more products that I can sell at a higher level, because now I have different levels to bring people in, including teaching them how to teach my stuff through games, which is something else I did recently. I created 3 games that are a great deal of fun and a new way to learn authenticity. So you never know what may come, and that was an investment too, but that investment ended up working out just fine. So what I found with everything, unless you really trust that, you end up to be one of those people that live in the hospice saying, I wish I had lived to my true self, because your true self is that person that you were sent to be. So to help you to live with no regrets, you please go to noregrets.solutions.
And they'll have a link for it.
Okay, good. noregrets.solutions. And what I have for you there is a white paper that tells you about the 9 dimensions of authenticity. That is what was given to me over that 30 years when I was told I had something to do. And that's the foundation for all of the programs that I certify coaches and speakers to deliver. And in those 9 dimensions, what you will also have is 9 case studies, 1 in each dimension, so you can see how people's lives have changed when they chose to be authentic and stepped into their own path and live their dreams. So I invite you to take that, enjoy it, and then learn from it, and hopefully, and get into my community, and let's talk some more, because I do newsletters. I do video newsletters weekly that take you more into no regrets and understanding things. And I'm all about you understanding and fulfilling. To me, no regrets is being authentic. No regrets is being the person God sent you here to be. So why not?
I love that. I love that. And I hope people will go and get that and read it and really take that in, because it makes such a difference when we take the wisdom we have each gained. And so often I often say, our struggles become our wisdom. And your story is so much a testament to that. And that struggle earned wisdom is often so powerful and insightful. So, Norma, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And maybe leave us, as we're going to wrap up, with just like a few last words as we finish off.
Well, I guess my few last words would be a tip that you can do. And what I find that most people have challenged in their authenticity is being able to listen to their inner voice and their intuitive nature. So what I'm going to give you is a 2-part perspective. One, I started when I was 8 years old, and the voices came to me when my parents didn't support me or didn't understand what I needed. And they started talking to me. And I said, if you're the voice that I should listen to, then you must be pretty powerful. So if you are, in the next week, show me somebody with red socks. There's somebody with red socks outside. And it's somebody else mentioned the word elephant in a conversation. And then maybe I'll believe you. So sure enough, within that week, I was like, and those things happened. And then for the next 4 or 5 weeks, I did the same thing with the different requests. And I gave the spirit time to set it up and make it happen. And by the 5th week or so, the spirit said, so you believe me now? And so I said, well, yes, I do. So that started my relationship. Then it's a question of making sure it's the right voice also. So, and knowing how it speaks to you. So think about when you ask yourself, what am I going to wear today? What am I going to eat? Or what time is it? These are questions we ask ourselves all the time. And look at how you get the answer. Does the answer come as a feeling, as a memory, as words, as a picture in your mind, in your gut? However it comes to you is a clue for how your voice speaks to you. I know mine comes a lot through images. I'll be in a conversation, an image will just pass over my head. And that's kind of a clue of a message I need to include or need to consider or need to do or something. So just begin to examine how you answer those questions, and that those two things together will help you to get more intimate with your inner voice, with your intuitive nature, which is the first step to authenticity.
Whoa, love that. That's super cool. I'm practicing that while you did that as a kid. So, all right, folks. So good advice, and we're gonna have a Facebook group. So this would be a fun thing to talk about in the Facebook group, and to hear what people are doing and trying and what you've experimented with. Because I agree. I think learning how to hear and trust that inner voice is super important. And I talk a lot. I'm glad we touched on it. That often we're not taught how to have access to that other way of knowing and that other level of guidance and hearing. So I love that you left us with that. I love that. Well, Norma, thank you.
Thank you, Devorah. I think this is the first time I've told my story in its totality, from age 8 to the 10 years of tragedy to now. So thank you for giving me a chance to share it. I appreciate it.
It is my honor and my pleasure. And I knew I need Norma in the Tell Your Story section. Well, and I want, I'm so honored that you did that. And I hope people see how powerful it is to tell your story. Once you're on the other side of it, you can.
Now I get a new story. I get a new story now.
Exactly right. Now, right. But then you're discovering your story. But it's very cool when you realize, I can say, oh, that's my 10 years of tragedy story, that you're on the other side of it enough to go, okay, I'm not in it.
Right. I'm not in it anymore. Hallelujah.
What a blessing. And the fact that you have light to bring out of that, I think you're going to have deeper and deeper teachings from how you got through all that. So thank you again, Norma. And I hope everybody is inspired to tell your story also, from hearing Norma share hers. All right. Thank you so much, Norma. And bye, everybody.